I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you got to worry about.
In a country where 70 murders happen every single day, these are the stories that reflect the realities of life in South Africa. Welcome to Profiler Africa on YouTube. I'm Paul Llewellyn. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. As always, I'm joined by none other than Jared Labuskaghni, author, former law enforcement officer, and head of L&S Threat Management. From 2001 to 2016, Gerard led the investigative psychology section of the South African Police Service, working on over 300 cases of serial murder and rape. He's also recognized internationally as an expert in forensic psychology, and he is, of course, simply known as our profiler. Good evening, Gerard. How are you doing? And so it's been quite the week. How's your week been?
It's only Tuesday, but it feels like it's already Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, lots of busyness so that we can all take a holiday, isn't it? And in the news as well, I mean, you know, lots of stuff going on. People throwing themselves in front of cars seems to be a new thing for the insurance. Businessmen getting kidnapped for ransoms, which seems to be a new thing. Jay-Z getting accused of things with P. Diddy. 230 rapists apparently arrested in KZN in a month, which sounds to me like a good start given the statistics. Anything jump out at you this week, Gerard?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, I've been following in the international news the assassination of the CEO of, was it Unlimited Health, UHC, Unlimited Healthcare, big medical insurance company in the United States. There's this dramatic footage, CCTV footage of the CEO early in the morning walking off to one of these sort of investor meetings, and a guy kind of just steps out behind him, hoodie, pulls out his gun with a silencer, takes aim and fires a shot, and then the gun seems to jam and he has to work with it and eventually shoots, I think, the CEO 2 or 3 times who unfortunately passed away. And of course, there was this big manhunt because he fled. But now New York's got so many cameras everywhere that they were able to pick up snippets of him here and there with a mask and then sort of partially without a mask. And they apparently identified him in Pennsylvania at a McDonald's. Somebody recognized him and called the cops, and they found a gun, a 3D printed gun, interestingly, with a silencer and a sort of 3-page handwritten manifesto. What's also interesting about this incident, at the crime scene, he'd written on the shell casings. So on the one shell casing, I think it said depose, deny, and something else, which are 3 apparently common legal phrases that they will use in the medical insurance world to not pay out medical insurance claims. So they'd actually written those in the bullets. So that now obviously is making people think that that is directly linked to his motivation. Then they found the backpack in Central Park that he had on, and inside was Monopoly money. So everybody was speculating about Monopoly money. There's big speculations about the firearm, because some people said, no, this is actually a veterinary gun that is silenced, and you can see it like this. And now, but the gun found in his backpack looks like a 3D printed Glock. So all kind of like lots of speculation, which you often get, and all these talking heads giving their, FBI this and ballistic experts that, giving their opinions. So that was quite fascinating to watch, and it seems like they've got the right guy, who apparently had a master's degree, went to an Ivy League university. So I think we'll find out a little bit more about this guy, his motive. Was there some personal reason that he was offended by some medical insurance company, or was this just sort of a corporate in America?
Absolutely. I mean, I was wondering whether they were going to catch him. It seemed like he was one of these kind of movie assassins for a little while, didn't it? And maybe it slipped off into the darkness. But I am not. It is not lost on me the fact that there are lots of murders that happen, and yes, there's some pretty shocking footage that goes with this one in the age of video. But big pharma and a murder, it gets a heck of a lot of the mainstream media's attention, doesn't it?
Yeah, what I also find fascinating about that quickly is that there were also threats received before the assassination. Now, we're not sure if those threats were by this guy or somebody else. But of course, I'm in the business of threats and threat assessment and threat management. So that was quite fascinating to me. And I'd actually done some work for UHC on some cases. So, I mean, I don't have any details about this particular case, no inside information, but I'm always interested by the threats and then people that act on those threats afterwards.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think, the fact that we're doing the show live, it's nice for us, I think, to be, to talk more about what's going on in the news, what's kind of piquing your interest from your, with your profiler eye. So I think we should do more of that. And, welcome to everyone that's watching along. Shelley, hello. Gazebo, how's it? We invite people also to tell us, things that they'd like us to talk about, questions they'd like you to comment on exactly. But now, before we dive into today's case, I'm just going to do a little bit of the admin. I want to remind you guys, please, to support the show. If you're enjoying our deep dives into South Africa's true crime stories, we do need your help. Every like, every share and subscription helps us to continue to bring you more Profiler. For more exclusive content, interviews, and behind-the-scenes footage, consider becoming a friend of the pod on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Profiler Africa or sign up as a member here on YouTube. Your support makes a huge difference and helps us grow and be able to bring you interviews like the one we have coming up next week. We've recorded 3 episodes for the Christmas and New Year period, and that will be Gerard in conversation with Mickey Pistorius for the first time on camera together. I get to sit back and do a lot of listening, as I'm sure you guys will too. So that's one definitely not to miss next week. Our latest post for those who have become members and on the YouTube page, we've posted an interview with Aaron Hyman, who is a journalist covering the Susan Road murder, which is the case we spoke about last week on the show. And tonight, Derek dives deep into the case on True Crime Room as well. That episode premieres at 9. And Derek is going to be joining us for the last 10 minutes of the show tonight to have a chat so you guys can get to meet him, and we'll talk a little bit about his experiences here in South Africa making the show. We also welcome your super likes. Super like us and your comment will get a mention, or your question will get asked. Before we get into this week's chilling story of a boy who committed his first crime at the age of 14 years old and went on to become, I think we've done the youngest serial killer, who is a female, but certainly one of the youngest. I just want to tell you that we are planning in the new year to do regular special kind of Q&A episodes where you guys get to share all the questions you'd want to ask a expert forensic psychologist or profiler in Gerard, and then we will spend time kind of tending to your guys' questions. And just to kick off, Gerard, I thought I would set the example with a question of my own that I have. Okay? And these are the kinds of questions we invite you guys to share with us, and we'll compile them into these lovely episodes. What case taught you the most about the human capacity for both good and evil, Gerard?
Sure, I have to think about that one. I think one that springs to mind is the murder of Andrea Venter. Some of you might have listened to our podcast previously on that case. It was also made into a documentary on Showmax. It's probably still available, called Original Sin. And long story short, Andrea Venter dated this guy, Gerard Janssen van Vuren, for a number of years. A lot of domestic violence during that time, him towards her, protection orders, police not responding. She eventually finishes studying, then relocates to a different city. He tracks her down, forces her way back in her life. And make a long story short, and probably about May, was it 2011, 2012, he ends up stabbing her at the entrance to her housing estate, where she fled from her flat to the safety of the security guard, who unfortunately was not able to assist her. I mean, that was just, in a sense, the almost like this. I don't use the word evil often, but it was this guy who just had this horrible, controlling, violent attitude towards his partner, and she's my possession, and if I can't have, I'll destroy her kind of feeling. And that's kind of the bad side of it. And then the other side of it, in this case, I got to know her mother and father relatively well. For those of you that don't know, he was arrested at the scene. He tried to kill himself, got bail eventually after a couple of months, and then just before his trial in 2013, he just disappeared. I tracked him down in Brazil and got him arrested there, and then they put him in jail for a while. Then they incorrectly released him by accident, and then we had to track him down again. And eventually in 2022, 2020, I think it was, in COVID, he was brought back to South Africa. 2022 convicted. So I got to know her parents quite well, and I mean that absolute heartache that the family, lives through the loss of a child. But I actually got to know his mother quite well. In fact, even till today, we have probably almost daily WhatsApp contact, and to see how this woman who herself suffered so much abuse in her marriage, etc., and just how her own struggles with how do I love a son who's done this, and how much she's become into her being as a human being, as a person, and sort of come to terms with everything that happened, and has really kind of worked very hard to get her life back on track. So that's kind of like the positive. It's kind of, for me, an uplifting side of that story. So that one is one that springs to mind when you ask the question.
Awesome, Gerard. And I look forward to reading the book on the case. So send in your questions. We'll make sure to answer them in upcoming episodes. You can share on the channel or on our social media pages, or feel free to email us on profilerafricainfo@gmail.com. That's profilerafricainfo, all one word, @gmail.com. Okay, so today we're diving into the case of a teenage serial killer from Vredendal in the Western Cape. A teenager who, like I said, committed his first crime at 14. He would kill, he would go on killing, but should he have been stopped is the question we're asking Gerard tonight. Tonight we unravel the details of his crimes, and we ask the question also, where is he now? Which is an interesting one. It was a case that Gerard worked on, so we get the ultimate insider angle once again. We're headed down to Vredendal, and we've got a message from Amanda van Heerden, 7980. Fantastic show, very informative. Thank you, Amanda. I live near Vredendal. There is a lot more crime now in the region because the police is just not effective and young killers don't get punished as they should. Psychos everywhere. Gerard, is that the case? I've been there. It was lovely when I was there. I was there for a wedding. What's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these little there's a lot of farms, if I recall correctly, wine farms around that area, that part of the Cape. I think it's about 2 hours north of Cape Town. But again, often with a lot of these wine farms, you come with a lot of, substance abuse problems from the workers who work on these farms. And this kind of is also played out in this particular case. I had another series there. Also a guy who was a worker on one of the wine farms. Many years ago, he sort of raped and killed a woman, went to jail, came out, and then another body's found. He's kind of like seen as a suspect because he'd done this before, but there was no clear evidence. His DNA is taken. We get a call from forensics saying, my goodness, this guy's DNA matches. So we phone the detective. We say there's a DNA match, but we're on our way down. Colonel DeLong and I fly down, drive up there the next day. And we go to with the detective to go find him now, because this guy we didn't have a reason to arrest at the time his DNA was taken. It was just kind of like a general screening. And I remember we drive in the bakkie to the farm. We phoned the farm owner to say, look, is so and so on duty today? He said, yes, we're here in this field. We go there, and so Yanni and I wait in the bakkie, and the detective walks off, and I see him chatting to clearly what is the farm manager, and we see the farm manager chat to, or the detective quickly chat to one of the laborers who's standing around there. And the laborer starts to walk towards our bakkie. So we think, okay, well, he's coming to get us. So Yanni and I get out the car and we start walking towards. And the guy kind of, as we get to him, he kind of just, hello, and he walks past us. So we think, okay. So we go to the detective, like, is the guy not here? Where is he? He says, oh, no, that's the guy who just walked past you. He's getting in the bakkie now. It's like, okay. So we kind of, turn around quickly. We're used to Joburg arrests where the guys are always going to gap and make a run for it. So we kind of like rush back to the bakkie and kind of just sit in there and keep him there. And like, no, just very Vredendal style. And then Yanni and I get back. We to the detective, to the branch at Vredendal police station. I'm kind of starting to interview him. Yanni's casually pacing to the docket and we're asking this guy, tell us about on this day, what happened. And he says, yeah, I was doing this. And I met this girl and I walked with her into the vineyard. Then I raped and murdered her. And I kind of like, Yanni and I both looked at each other and like, holy shit, he just confessed. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, thank you. And are you prepared to tell this to a magistrate to make a confession? And he did so. So that was just kind of, Vredendal place.
Okay, well then, educate us about this case because I'm just gonna be a little bit more careful the next time I'm in Vredendal. Clearly, So we have to go back to 2005, where we see this at 14 years old. I mean, we're not allowed to name him because of the age at which he committed these crimes. I will call him teenage serial killer, but that's as far as I understand, his first kind of act of violence is a crime against his sister.
Yeah, October 2005. I don't know if he was ever prosecuted for this. I think he was, but it was assault against his sister. He was 14 years old at the time. But kind of where he really first becomes a huge problem is Jan 2006. He seemed to like January because the next 3 crimes after this first murder in 2006 was all in January. And essentially he murders an adult female who's also a farm laborer. He was at the age, I think it was either 14 or 15. He was born in, I think, the 8th of January. And I don't know the exact date in January when this murder took place. That's why I say it was either 14 or 15 when he committed his very, very first murder. And essentially what happens, because of his youthful age, he kind of gets sent off to, for lack of a better word, a reform school in Kraaifontein, just outside of Cape Town, where there's, I think about 15 kids in this institution. And he kind of sort of gets a sentence, but it's not the same as because of his age, his youthfulness. While he's at this Kraaifontein center, they're allowed to go home twice a year to their family on holiday. So it's not really prison. And kind of fast forward to, the 4th of Jan, 2009, 3 years later, he's on holiday for the December holidays. And him and I think it was a family member, like a cousin of his who was about 2 years younger than him, essentially, they both end up raping and murdering a lady. So now, obviously, his second murder, a few days later, on the 18th of January, he rapes and tries to murder another lady. He literally bashes her head in with a rock that was probably about this size. Bashes her head in, rapes her, leaves her for dead in the field, in the vineyard. And she kind of comes to and crawls out. And of course, the police are summoned and she's taken to hospital. I actually interviewed her a couple of days later. And I mean, her head was like the size of a football after this assault. So definitely an attempt to murder her, but definitely a rape. So we have the 2006 January murder of the one lady. He goes to Kraaifontein Reform School. He's on holiday in January 2009. Him and his cousin, who was a couple years younger than him, murder the one lady, rape and murder. And then he by himself, a few days later, 2 weeks later, attempts to murder and does rape this other particular lady.
Okay, so, a lot of information there. Let's unpack it a little bit. First of all, so he commits his first murder and he's sent to reform school. Now, reform school, and then in 2009, he comes out on holiday and commits another murder. What's happening with all the reforming here, Gerard? I mean, the reforming is clearly not working very well. So,
February of that same year, 2009, Colonel DeLong and I go down. We go to the reform school because we now want to speak to, the teachers, the psychologists, the OT. We want to get background information about this guy. The social worker we speak to. They don't really describe any problematic behavior, really, if I recall correctly, in his time in the reform school. We tried to speak to the psychologist, and I contacted her literally from February, I see here, until May. And despite all promises that she would provide us with information, provide us with a report, to this day she never did. Now, and I later figure out why. She said, what she did say is that, between sort of May and, I just want to find the dates here, between May and December, which was 8 months, I didn't really see him much in that time that he was there. There's only 15 kids at this place at the time. You have a guy who's now committed a second murder. You're telling me you didn't really see him much, and he was due to be discharged anyway a few months after that December when you last saw him? Yeah. I mean, that was shocking for me. And I think that's why she was ducking and diving, because she knew she dropped the ball. And I mean, here we have a kid who now comes out and commits another murder and attempted murder. So doesn't seem like much seems to be really have been done with this kid, which, do we blame the system for that? Or do we blame him for what he did later on? What help was he getting?
The psychologist has got that Vredendal chill that you were talking about earlier. But I went through the case file that you showed me, and I see that your notes got a little bit shirty at times. Like, I've been trying to get hold of this woman, and she's not responding. I mean, you were you were on top of it at the time, and you were very kind of self-aware. You were very aware of the fact that, there was, there was not too much reforming going on, like I say.
Didn't seem like it, no.
Yeah. Okay, so we had that 2006, but just generally, I mean, first of all, I just want to talk about kind of being a teenager, at this age, committing these kinds of crimes. I mean, how common is this? And then also, just to underline what your involvement in the case was, just to establish so that people understand as we talk about it as well. So first of all, teenage serial killers, how common is that? And, what are your thoughts there? And just outline what your involvement in the case was.
Yeah, so I mean, my involvement, so I got contacted, as I said, in January 2009, after that, sort of those two murders back-to-back had occurred when he was on holiday, by Captain Ken Speed, who's now a colonel, who was one of the kind of guys at the Serious and Violent Crime Unit in Cape Town. They heard about this case, they notified us, and we then, went up and also met with the forensics guy, Captain Marius Hubert, who was at the time, did a lot of the forensics for those 2009 crime scenes. And essentially, it's like what we often do in these cases. I mean, the case was already solved, so there wasn't an investigative role. But again, just to make sure, to get all the information about the case, because we try to keep tabs on all serial murder cases, make copies of the dockets for our own records, etc. And if there's any need for our assistance, at the trial in some capacity, if there's not direct forensic evidence, can we testify on case linkage? Can we testify at sentencing? Etc. So that's kind of like what the role. I can't recall if I actually ended up testifying at the sentencing of this case. But it must, again, primarily just that we've got all this information, if there's any other assistance we can need. And of course, are we looking for other bodies? We can't assume that the ones that have landed on our lap are the only cases. Is this case being conducted along the lines of how we would expect for a serial murder investigation? So that's kind of how myself and Yanni ended up getting involved, going down, interviewing. And we did interview him.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about him, and then let that be a lead into kind of talking to us a little bit about these kinds of crimes in young offenders like this.
As I said earlier, this area, there's a lot of substance abuse, definitely amongst the farm workers. I know in the previous years, there was one of the practices was to pay the laborers in wine as part of their salary, which legally done away with, but I'm sure still continues. Yeah. So you have the sort of generational alcohol abuse, which, and when I met this kid, I kind of almost got a bit of a feeling that there might be some, fetal alcohol kind of impairment here. Not particularly forthcoming. He wouldn't say anything about the cases, so it wasn't exactly the most stunning interview. Very subdued. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't cheeky. So really not the most productive of interviews that we've ever had with an offender. But it is what it is. You have to deal with it. And as I said, like you said, he is one of the youngest serial murderers. I don't know if we've had, besides the little girl we spoke about from Jan Kempdorp, this is probably the youngest serial that I've had. I can't think of anybody else who was younger, and then anybody else who was close to this particular guy in terms of years. He was 14-ish, then he was 17, and the third incident, he just turned 18. So it's sort of, that time span that was. And he also escaped from custody in January of 2009. Was caught very quickly. I think he was caught as he was walking off the property of the police station.
Okay. I noted that some comments from teachers who'd said that, he was not an aggressive kid at school. He was, in fact, the one teacher even commented that he was bullied a bit. He wasn't a bully. He was more the bullied type of child. So that's interesting. Any abuse in his, obviously there's the circumstances of, living in that part of the world and kind of coming from an impoverished background, but any other kind of standout signs of abuse or anything like that?
Can't recall. I'm trying to think whether his mother was an absent figure or she'd passed away. But not that I'm aware of, which of course doesn't mean that there wasn't. You'll see in a few moments we've got some photographs of the kind of circumstances that they lived in, which was not not particularly great. When he wasn't in Kraaifontein Juvenile Center, he kind of slept, I think, on a bed in the kitchen or on his sister's bed if she wasn't there. So really, it's really the hard upbringing that these kids would have had, even if there wasn't physical or psychological abuse.
Yeah. I'm just going to pull up a question we've got here. Oopsie, let me put it in a sensible spot there. So from Shellyfoot, why would this boy be classed as a serial killer and not a spree killer? And Jared, before you answer that, we're going to answer that after a little break. Guys, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you're enjoying the content, drop us a super like to support the show. Your engagement means the world to us. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. And for all your video or television production needs, there's only one place to go. That's plotshift.co.za. And we're back. Okay, so Jared, there we go. Shellyfoot, why would this boy be classed as a serial killer and not a spree killer? Thanks for the question, Shelley.
Yeah. Thanks, Shelley. So essentially a spree is serial, firstly, is you've got an event, then the sort of cooling off period where the person sort of carries on with their life, and then another event, incident, and then a cooling off period, etc. So that's what we've got here. We've got the January 2006 murder. He gets arrested, he kind of gets to the reform school, comes on holiday, and then in 2009 January, he kills this other lady, then 2 weeks later, another lady. So that's why we classify it as a serial, as opposed to a spree, which is somebody, for example, who sort of drives down through a city shooting people. It's kind of like a spree is like one drawn-out event, very often with multiple geographic locations. That event is usually over a period of a couple of hours. So it's kind of like a rampage killing. But this, because we have these clearly separate incidences, separated by time, the guy carries on with whatever his normal life is, and then he gets the urge to go out and do it again. Whereas a spree, like I said, I'm trying to think of a good example nowadays of a recent spree. We had a guy, a number of years ago, in Dunsane Township outside of East London. And I mean, he kind of came off duty as a security guard, and then he started drinking early in the morning. He went to go find his girlfriend who hadn't stayed at home, ends up shooting her, and then kind of walks around the township, going to his girlfriend's friends' houses and shooting people, whoever they are there. And then he hijacks a car, shoots the owner, drives around a bit. And this kind of took place over in the confines of this township over a couple of hours until eventually he was cornered by the police and then died. So that would be more what we would say as a spree. One event, bit of movement, but there's not the cooling off period.
Okay, great. All right, thanks for that, Shelley. All right, we could do one quick more question before we can, because we've got an interesting one here from, I think it's Lenine Herman. Would fetal alcohol syndrome affect criminal capacity if diagnosed?
So I think it is something that would be considered. If he was sent, I can't recall whether he was sent for some kind of observation. I would imagine he was. That would have been something that, if it was a concern, they would have assessed and looked into, and then determined how much, because it's not just does he have it or not? To what degree does he have it? What is the degree that it influences behavior and decision making? Can he still determine right from wrong and act in accordance? And then, of course, is he able to now consult with his lawyer, etc.? So it wouldn't just be the mere presence of it, the extent of it, and how does it play a role in the crime or not? Or is it something rather that one must look at for sentencing, for mitigation to some degree?
Okay, great. All right, great. Thanks for those questions, and I'm sure we'll take some more. We're also going to be responding to some questions that we've received over the past week on the YouTube channel, or here on YouTube. So, Gerard, where are we? Where were we? Let's get back to the case. So let's look at some of the stuff. So I'll just bring up so first of all, the 2006 murder of Mana Swartz, and you could maybe so we've talked about these cases, but it gives you a sense of the location here, Gerard. Maybe you just want to elaborate a little there.
This is a typical kind of little farm workers' huts that they would stay in, sometimes a whole family or two families, depending on the size and the division of the house. Not great. You can see there's some broken windows, etc. And this is inside one of these rooms there. You can see where he bludgeoned this particular victim to death with the pole. So incredibly brutal murder of the victim, who probably at that point was lying down. If you look at the blood spatter, if you want to go back there, Paul, to the previous slide. I don't know if you can call it up again.
Okay, I will. There we go.
You can kind of see where you get that sort of the blood spurting in the different directions. That and kind of like a lighter spot with look like some smudges. That's probably where the victim was when most of this. And you can see the blood is high speed moving outwards from that particular point in time. So she was probably lying down, incapacitated at the point, and he's continuing to bludgeon her. That's numerous blows with an iron rod that this woman. So very, very brutal death if you just look at the blood spatter in this particular case.
Absolutely. All right, and then we are on to, then are we talking about the 2009 murder then of Elizabeth?
He was caught and like immediately after that 2006 murder and sent off to eventually to the reform school, etc. So like I said, he was now out on holiday from the reform school, part of his sentence from the previous murder, and this particular case, 2009, 4th of January, just before he turns 18, they take this particular victim, that day being him and his, as I said, I think it was his cousin, who was about 2 or 3 years younger than him, to the area, and then they stab her, rape her, stab her, and then drag her body under some of the vineyard leaves and basically leave her there. Then go about 500 meters away to a friend's house. The victim, again, you can see the typical little farm worker's little hut. This is where she was last seen, and she was then dragged into this vineyard where the rape and murder happened. And we'll see a bit of a close-up where her body was eventually found. And this is where Captain Marius Joubert from the Cape Town Forensic Science Laboratory Unit, Forensic Science Laboratory, he's one of the very, very, very experienced biology crime scene experts. In other words, they're looking for blood and semen, found blood, obviously, on the various leaves, etc. Did a very, very thorough job of the forensics in this particular case. And the case that happened 2 weeks later, he also was involved in gathering the forensic evidence. And I think it was actually him that then notified Captain Speed from Serious Violent Crime, and then Speed notified us about this particular series.
Okay.
Victim himself.
Okay. Some effort to break the phone by the look of it. I mean, maybe a little bit of.
Yeah, I don't know whether that was just in the scuffle of the fight.
Yeah.
They were thinking of trying to destroy some kind of forensic evidence or something. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Okay. So so there's the 2 murders, and then the next would be then we went on to the final case, which was the attempted. This is just looking at some of the. So this is the cousin's bedroom.
Cousin bedroom, yeah.
Okay.
So not great circumstances. That's
just
his.
Gives you a sense of their living environment, yeah.
Yeah.
And then our main suspect's room.
Yeah.
His bed. Okay. All right, Jared. So where to next on this one? What was the next step for you?
2 weeks later, I mean, this guy has already just turned 18 on the 8th of January. This case is on the 18th. And he alone sort of lures this lady into the vineyard, rapes her, smashes her head with a huge rock, and leaves her for dead, as I said. And she kind of like comes to the following day, crawls to get some help, and then he is arrested.
No, and extremely lucky. I've seen some of the photographs of her post the event. You're right. It's incredible amount of swelling on her head.
I mean, this is one of these cases where it's like the grace of God that this woman survived, because she should have been dead if you look at the amount of trauma to her head. Very, very sad.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, the case is wrapped up. This is not a case where it's all about the investigation necessarily, because it's wrapped up pretty efficiently and effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then we go on to the court case and the what follows. That kind of just lead us into that. What happened. Now we've got the 2 murders, the 1 attempted, and now he's locked up and ready to be taken to court.
Yeah. So essentially, so the 2006 case already been adjudicated. That's why it was sent to Kryfontein. So he's now going to stand his trial on the successful murder that he committed with his cousin, and the attempted murder that he committed 2 weeks later by himself, and the escape from custody when he tried to escape from Vredendal police station. Okay. And I remember, I don't want to get paranoid about people not doing their jobs and something suspicious about it, but he was actually only charged with culpable homicide for the murder of that lady that he committed with his cousin. Now, culpable homicide, in case you aren't familiar with the term, is the accidental causing of someone's death. Like if I'm driving my car and I'm texting and I ride over someone, you can't charge me with murder. You would charge me with culpable homicide. Drunk driving, you charge someone with culpable homicide. If I'm busy cleaning my firearm and it is accidentally around the chamber and the trigger, it goes off and it flies out the window and kills my gardener, for example, that would be a culpable homicide because I was negligent. Here, they stabbed and raped someone. Sure. This should never have been charged as a culpable homicide. And I kind of remember getting there, and this was like after the fact. And so, but why on earth is this kind of guy? Why would you charge these guys with this? And you don't do that because they're a younger age. You charge them with something less. You can't really charge them with something that they didn't commit. Yeah. Because if you charge them with culpable homicide, the courts can't go upwards and say, no, this is actually murder. I'm going to convict you of murder. Courts can go downwards. So in other words, if we charge someone with murder and the evidence as it came out in the trial actually showed that this wasn't intentional, it was a negligent thing, the court can find you guilty of a lesser crime and say, we're going to find you guilty of culpable homicide. But they can't go upwards. So if I don't know how on earth this could have been charged as culpable homicide.
Just remind us, who's responsible for deciding what that charge will be?
That would be the prosecutor who gets the docket from the police after the arrest, and once all the investigations are outstanding, it's the prosecutor who decides what are the charges that are going to be formulated. And I remember thinking this is why we weren't involved up to that point, because I remember getting involved and it was too late, and I was like horrified, like how on earth could this person be charged with that as opposed to murder? This is no way a negligent. They weren't careless. How do you rape and stab someone till death and you say this was a negligent killing of another person?
Exactly.
No, it can't.
I mean, could something to do with the age? Maybe it's just a lack of knowledge around these types of this being something that a teenager could do. So
you would never have a different charge because it's a teenager. You would still have the same charge, but how you might sentence them would be vastly different. And that's fine. I don't have a problem that you sentence a 17-year-old who committed murder different to a 30-year-old who committed a murder. I don't have an issue with that because they are children. But that's where you reflect the fact that they're children. Not, it's like saying, well, we're not going to charge you with attempted murder. We're going to charge you with assault or something. You don't downgrade it because they're children, where it influences whether you prosecute them at all and B, what the kind of sentence they would get. So that couldn't have been an excuse to charge him with culpable homicide instead of murder. No.
For sure. Okay. So, it does sound kind of... Do you have the opportunity to... you're there at this time. Do you have the opportunity to... Or you're kind of... you're in the police, you're aware of the case, you've been involved in the case. Do you not have the opportunity to influence that or to kind of comment on that or to engage with the prosecutor?
So if we had been involved early enough before the trial started and you'd said, look, we're getting ready for trial, we want you involved in some way, because often in a lot of trials we would work very closely with the prosecutor from the point of even formulating the charges to what evidence can we give, etc. You'd have this ongoing involvement and discussion. And I remember kind of thinking that we kind of were only informed after the fact that this thing was already on trial. And once it's on trial, you can't change the charges. It's too late. There's no way you can change the charge sheet once you've started the trial and upgrade it to a murder. It's impossible. You can't do that. It would be a mistrial automatically. So it was by the time we realized this, it's way too late. If we'd been involved earlier, we would have said this is absolutely unacceptable. And I do remember afterwards contacting the DPP's office in Cape Town to say, how could this have happened? But it's too late. It doesn't matter. It's that was the charges that were proffered to this person. You can't even on an appeal change it. That's not something you go and deal with on an appeal. If that's what the charges were and that's what was presented, it's too late once the trial starts.
So the evidence is good. The culpable homicide is the charge. I'm guessing that we know that he gets then prosecuted, yes?
And
So
convicted.
he's found guilty and convicted. I'm guessing a culpable homicide sentence charge means that it's not the kind of sentence you would hope for somebody that technically here is a serial killer.
No, and I think our viewers are going to be quite shocked when they hear what he was
Yeah.
ultimately do. So for that
Wow.
rape murder, which they
Hit us
charged
with
as
it.
a culpable homicide, 6 years imprisonment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the second murder. Second
Now-
time they killed someone.
Now
And then
this,
for the
this was when?
attempted, went to trial in 2011.
Yeah.
The second charges, which was the attempted rape and the murder and the attempted murder and the rape of the other lady, he got 6 years for the attempted murder and 4 years for the rape. I mean, all in all, I mean, these are shockingly, and then he was already 18 at that point.
Yeah.
These are shockingly inappropriate sentences, even for someone who is young. It's like that. This is like your third freaking time that you have tried or you have successfully killed someone. Like, what are we giving here? Like leniency? I don't know about that. So basically, he's long out. You know, he would, even if they kept him for the maximum of 6 years. And remember, you can get parole halfway through very often, your sentence. But I mean, this would have expired. Let's say he was sentenced in 2012. Let's give or take. 2018, he would have been out.
Yeah. So he's out.
Yeah. Him
Bottom
and his
line
little
is
buddy.
that there's absolutely no way that either of these guys are still locked up for those crimes.
And his co-accused in what turned out then to be the culpable homicide case got 5 year sentence, I guess, because he was a bit younger. I think he was under 18. But
okay, so I mean, in your professional opinion, I mean, what do we expect for this young man who has now grown into adulthood? I mean, we don't actually know where he is, and we don't know any specific details about, his circumstances right now. But from your, with your psychologist hat on, what would you expect, possibly?
Yeah, well, I think if you basically killed 2 people, try to kill another one, you've raped 2 of them, and you started when you're 14, that is not a good prognosis for your future. I mean, this isn't just like a kid who was stealing and bunking and smoking cigarettes when he was younger. The earlier you start with violent crime and sexually violent crime, it's actually worse. The worse your prognosis is going to be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I actually asked a friend of mine the other day to try and follow up if he's been arrested since then. I haven't had any feedback. But yeah, I'd be quite curious to know actually what's he been up to since he's been out. I can't think this kid is not someone that we should expect is going to suddenly turn his life around and become a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
Sad as it is to say it, we should have been more focusing on the protection of society than necessarily at that point worrying about him.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a bit unnerving, isn't it? And yeah, it's not very lacquer to think about. I mean, I think we've kind of covered this case. We've got a few more things we still want to do on the show tonight. What is it, apart from the obvious that we've kind of really underlined here, what stands out for you about this case? I mean, I guess that's kind of a redundant question, isn't it?
Yeah, so obviously the youthfulness of the guy, obviously, and the fact that this guy was not charged with the murder for that rape and murder of that other young lady. It's just, that irks me. Maybe we should have tried to get more of a tab on this case as it was getting ready for trial. We would have been able to pick that up. But by the time we realized that, as I said, the trial was underway and you can do nothing about it. So yeah, I think it wasn't even on our radar to consider that somebody wouldn't be charging this person with murder if you stabbed someone to death, especially after a rape. Yeah. That's not a mental death in any sense of the definition.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see if you'll let us know if you get any feedback on that one, and we will in turn let you folks know at home as well. Okay, so that is the story then of a teenage serial killer, guys, and like I say, not a very comfortable story, and as so often happens on the podcast and in our discussions, raises a lot of questions about the system and how things can work in this part of the world. All right, Gerard. So now what we're going to do, while we've been chatting away, our very good friend has joined us, and I'm going to see if we can. I'm hoping he's just going to appear here by the magic of technical wizardry that our good friend Derek Reedley, who's joining us all the way from Canada. I'm going to see if we can bring him in here. Derek. Derek, there you are.
I heard your accent all the way over here. Hi, guys. I have background envy. You both have better backgrounds than me.
You know what? Gerard's winning that competition by a mile. You must see when he gets the disco lights going there, Derek.
Oh, you're both looking pretty sexy. And guys, I'm loving the show. I'm loving the insight. And I'm, I became a fan of true crime and a fan of African true crime. Because of you two. So it's great to reconnect, and I can't wait to get into the weeds and talk about some of those things that really opened my eyes up a couple of years back when I was over to visit.
Well, just to remind folks, if you're new to the channel watching for the first time, or if you haven't had a chance to really dig, have a look around the Profiler Africa channel, for the last few weeks, straight after the live here, we've been posting episodes of Derek's show, True Crime Room, which we filmed here in South Africa with Derek. And Derek, let me let you explain a little bit about the show before I start yapping away.
Sure. True Crime Room for me was an incredible experience to really dive into true crime and understand a little bit more about what drives people. But the other layer on it was it became a fascinating journey into the subculture and the history of South Africa, the differences between the cultures, the differences between the justice systems, the difference in the idea of redemption and carrying on your own life are things that really, really struck me. It was fascinating to talk to so many people who had been involved in the crimes. It was fascinating to talk to podcasters and journalists who'd researched them. But getting the opportunity to sit and talk with Gerard, who has been at the highest level of investigation in South Africa, was certainly a treat. And it led to an understanding of both the science and the intricacies of these cases in the region that I still think about all the time. I'm still, there are still cases that will awaken me in the middle of the night. Last week we talked about the staged Muti murder, and just going back over it to prep for that episode to air, it literally gave me chills. So there is no shortage of incredible stories in South Africa. And for true crime fans internationally, I really, really urge them to take a good look at what you guys are talking about, because there is, to me, there's a level of crime and a level of anger and violence that is just beneath the surface in South Africa. And it gets played out in ways that are more shocking and offensive to me as somebody in North America, where it seems to me where it's harder to get away with some of these crimes. So, look, guys, this has been a nice journey for me to be on with you guys, and I'm thrilled to talk about some of these difficult cases again, including Jason Rhoda.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that story last week, and that's going to be the episode that flights now at 9 o'clock, and then folks will be able to stream it after that at their leisure over the Christmas period, guys. Binge watching True Crime Room and Profiler, I hope, is on your guys' agenda. The Jason Rhodes story. Just tell us what's one or two of the things that really stood out for you, whether with the Jason Rhodes story or some of the other cases. Just one or two more kind of highlights of things or lowlights, if you like, of things that really jumped out at you in your time here. Well,
look, the Jason, is it Rhoda or Rode? I say Rhoda here in Canada, but maybe I'm wrong. So anyways, Jason Rhoda. That case really stuck out for me because it was so much more different than a lot of the cases we covered. A lot of cases had to do with less economically advantaged people, more transient people, people that are harder to identify. And look, there's a whole vein of that really plays on my mind. In Canada, it's almost impossible to find a victim and not be able to identify them within a few days. Everybody's got a driver's license. Everybody's got DNA or familiar DNA. It's just not a case of finding a body and getting to the end of your investigation and going, well, I guess we're not going to identify that person. That doesn't really happen here. Now, all that said, this case was amazing to me because Jason and his wife, Susan, were a very, very affluent couple. They were going through some marital trouble, obviously Jason's fault. I guess what really stuck with me with this case, two things. In hindsight, knowing that the murder occurred in 2016, it's now 8 years later. The fact that Jason still maintains his innocence in the face of a preponderance of evidence and logic that just says, look, he's guilty. That to me indicates a level of ego that is off the charts. I mean, he's convicted. He's doing the time. Why not just free yourself and get on with your life? Admit it. Everybody knows you did it anyways, or at least that's the way I look at it. Secondly, is the length of the sentence. His original sentence was 20 years. And with a majority of sentences that we talked about in all of our cases, I was really shocked at the 20-year mark, at the fact that everybody automatically gets up for parole, or many are paroled?
There's no such sentence as life without parole. So at 25 years, anyone will qualify, will start parole hearings if you get a life.
Yeah.
There are
to
some,
me, that seems...
Gerard could kind of give us some of the, some of the exceptions, but that's the basic rule.
Well, to me, though, it seemed the sentences seem too short. They don't seem to be discouraging enough. I'm a Canadian, so we live next door to the most, the United States, the excited states of America. But we still, although we're a peace-loving and a gentle people, we still do have our pieces of shit as well. Yeah. And I mean, the rule is the pieces of shit go away for a long time. I was listening to you guys talk earlier about the young man, the teen, who is a repeated killer and is now on, freely living his life. Well, his victims aren't. Gerard, I believe wholeheartedly in what you said. The Crown or the state needs to take an interest in the protection of society, and that has to factor in at a higher level. I would see. I see all kinds of recidivism and really horrific crimes, and knowing these people are out in the street, it doesn't seem logical to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Derek, I love the comment you made. I agree with you wholeheartedly that there's if you're a true crime fan and you're interested in, whether it's the ins and outs of a particular case or getting kind of Gerard's really deep kind of psychological insight into some of these stories and what have you, we do have a wealth of amazing stories. I often say that, unfortunately, if you come to South Africa, you can, if you want to make wildlife documentaries, there's lots of great wildlife out there. But, unfortunately, if you want to make crime content, there's also a lot of pretty scary crime going on. So it is a good place. And we've all seen, and let's be honest, I feel like we've all seen 20 Ted Bundy documentaries. So it's also interesting to hear stories that come from a different, first of all, different stories, but also that come from a different social and cultural context.
Yeah.
Well, there's no question. It's incredible education. It's incredible, entertainment for true crime fans. But on the whole, unless we keep talking about the shortfalls of the system shall never repair or fix itself. So you're also doing a public service by carrying forth these messages and casting these murderers, these horrific personalities, in the light they deserve to be cast. So bravo for that. The final thing I'll say is, as I said, the nature of the stories that are coming out of South Africa are amazing to me. I wasn't a true crime fan before I got there. I didn't really get it, but I became one simply by spending time and understanding the nature of these cases. It's fascinating to me because it's so different than what we're used to in other parts of the world. And I think there's a global audience that is going to tune in and keep listening to you guys.
Well, I hope so. So that's why we want folks to share, like, subscribe, do all of that good stuff. Derek, we are encouraging folks to share their questions, considering, I always feel privileged to have the opportunity to chat to one of the great minds in forensic psychology on the planet, I think. So we're encouraging folks to send in their questions, and in the new year, we'll be doing some strictly Q&A questions where we'll be diving into what the community is interested in. So I'm curious to know if you have a question for Derek. Oh, sorry, for Gerard. What am I saying, Derek? For Gerard.
Yeah, he may have questions. I probably don't have too many answers. However, I'll just going back to what I've been talking about, the anonymity of the populace, the transient population in sub-Saharan Africa, the fact that people will migrate for work, they will, things that we don't understand in Canada. I talk to my kids a couple of times a week, and in sub-Saharan Africa, somebody may say, I'm going to walk south and get work. I may be back in 5 years. I may not. It's just completely foreign to us. So losing touch in this world of social media and cell phones and identification is so different. That comes with a certain wealth of population, and there are economic disparities. What are the technological advances that you see that will lead to perhaps the identification of a lot of these nameless victims, and perhaps lead to quicker arrests in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a good solution in the pipeline. I think the easiest way is obviously fingerprinting people. That's still the quickest way to identify people. But like you say, if you have people who are just walking over the border, they're not going through any kind of process, they're not applying for asylum necessarily. If you haven't fingerprinted somebody somewhere, where do you start? They could literally be from anywhere, and not even sub-Saharan Africa, further north, because you have people from all over Africa coming down into South Africa seeking, obviously a better life from where they were. Because people say, well, what about DNA? But, unless you have a database of people's DNA, what do you have to compare that to? And the police don't have the South African government doesn't swab people as they're born or when they come into the country, and we put that in a little database somewhere. All the police has is basically crime scene DNA. And of course, if we have an unidentified body, if we think it's possibly this person, we can go to their kids or their parents and do a comparison. But DNA and teeth, you need to have a suspicion of who it could be. So all you have left to run something through a database really is fingerprints. So I don't know whether the solution is, tighter border control. I think that across the world is an issue that, and if you do come in, at least, we can get a thumbprint, hopefully, from people as they go through passport control. That at least if we can run the thumbs through people that come in, through the border, that would improve that. But I think that's probably going to be the only way we would be able to improve this, if we were able to just fingerprint people more frequently. And the only time South Africans are fingerprinted is when they apply for their ID books. I think when you apply for a firearm, I don't think for a driver's license they fingerprint you. So there's certain times in a South African person's life where you will be fingerprinted. So if you're a South African, much better chance you're going to be identified if the fingerprints are fresh enough. But otherwise, I don't know how we're ever going to get over this problem of how many millions of people in the country illegally who we don't have any kind of documentation on to identify them.
Yeah. And unfortunately, they become targets.
Yeah. Hopefully we can get 50 million subscribers from South Africa, and we'll share the knowledge, and that will all the knowledge that people need to know, the kind of things that come up on the podcast, and that will help to motivate and affect change. You never know.
I have no doubt you'll hit 50 million. No doubt.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely. Derek, so it's 9:00 right now. So just for FYI, everyone, that this week's episode of True Crime Room is premiering now. You can take a look at that after the podcast, and it's going to be available to stream, with all of the other episodes. So like we say, we really hope that Profiler Africa is a channel that is on your binge list for Christmas. Derek, before we say good night for tonight, and thanks for joining us, I hope that you'll join us again on the podcast, and we can discuss some of the future episodes coming up on True Crime Room, and maybe even we can rope in some folks on some Canadian stories as well, and maybe
I'm all in, guys.
We can do some conversations together here on the podcast. That would be awesome. Just what's your final thought before we say good night tonight, Derek?
Well, I'll just be cute, and I'll say I wish I was in the height of summer where you guys are, instead of the height of winter where I am. The mercury is below zero here, so my ass may be here, but my heart is with you guys.
Well, I can tell you, we're going through a heat wave here in Johannesburg. So, shirt. I'm not going to tell you what I got on the bottom half here. You know what I mean? Sitting in a bucket of ice water in my underpants. That's what's going on.
Well, continued success, guys. I'll come back anytime. Thank you very much.
Thanks for speaking to us, Derek. Catch True Crime Room, guys. Thanks, Derek. That's Derek. There you go, guys. You've all met him now. What a great guy. We love Derek. And hopefully we'll, we're going to play out all the remainder of those episodes, and hopefully we'll get to make some more as well. And like we say, do some more collaborating with Derek on some multinational stories, I think. Hey, Gerard? You got friends in Canada as well, eh?
I do indeed.
You got some profiler buds up there.
Great profilers, great investigators in Canada. Probably one of the best units. I think if you wanted to go learn to do profiling, probably the Ontario Provincial Police in Canada is one that I would recommend people. That's where you probably want to work, even to a degree more so than the FBI, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Well, then we definitely need to send out some invitations, and maybe I'll take a break on those nights and Derek can host the show. Okay, so just to wrap up, before we say goodnight to everyone, we've gone over the hour. Just a couple of questions that came up on the channel over the past week, Jared. I'm just going to throw them your way and give us some nice to-the-point answers here. Could you discuss Inga Lotz's murder? How on earth did it remain unsolved? I thought the almost exclusive focus on Frank van der Vyver was premature and definitely a reason why the murderer was never brought to book. And that is from Matilda Williams, 9608.
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say that from day one Fred was identified as a suspect. In fact, I think it was only once that fingerprint came back and the fingerprint people said we found his fingerprint on the cover of a DVD. Now, if you follow the case, you'll know that there was later on controversy about whether that fingerprint was properly labeled, whether that fingerprint did come from a DVD cover, which was relevant because she'd only taken it out that morning after he had allegedly left the flat, or came from a glass, which would have been there from when he was there the night before. So that was one of the big controversies that came out, and that was bad work done by the police, that it wasn't properly labeled, that they weren't able to convincingly say it was from the DVD cover. And then, of course, we had the other more nefarious work done by one of the cops who basically lied about the footprint match, that the print matched Fred van der Vyver's shoe, and he'd gone overseas to see the world expert, and he came back saying, oh, yeah, that guy agreed with me. And then it turned out that the guy hadn't agreed with him. So that was just dishonest work in terms of the footprint. But he wasn't really a suspect until that fingerprint came back. And then, of course, that fingerprint placed him back in that flat after he said he had already left, after she'd taken out a DVD to watch that day. So that, in that context, them focusing on Fred, I don't think was wrong, because that fingerprint placed him in a place where he said he wasn't at that point in time. Look, I mean, they did follow up lots of other avenues. So it's not as if, Fred, and then nobody's ever looked at anything else. There's just never been any other conclusive evidence to point towards somebody else. I mean, there's lots of theories, and all these high-profile cases, there's lots of conspiracy theories and rumors and stories, and one has to be careful about not going down those rabbit holes because they are endless. But yeah, a very sad case that no one was ultimately been able to be brought to trial. But it was, further after that, also further investigated by other people without any success in identifying an alternative suspect.
Okay, we hope that answers your question. May we speculate about Jocelyn Smith, missing child from the West Coast? How on earth can she be so missing?
Well, I mean, sadly, it's not a very uncommon thing. Lots of little kids go missing, and that can be because of anything from human trafficking to being murdered, and the body is just not being discovered. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. It's a very tragic case, but I'm not surprised that she's gone missing because many kids go missing, and not surprised that her body hasn't been found or she hasn't been located because there's just lots of reasons why that could be. I'd like to think that the police did not leave any stone unturned. I wasn't involved, in that particular investigation, so I can't give insights, unfortunately.
Okay. And then we've got from the real Brett Lane. Do you consider the prospect of serial killers listening to your show? Because it seems many serial killers have a keen interest in following or learning about other serial killers' investigations and processes.
That's very likely. I mean, not just serial murderers, any kind of criminally minded person. We try not to reveal, intimate things that the police do to try and trace people. So generally what we talk about is already public knowledge that has been spoken about by countless other people. So yes, that is a consideration. I try not to mention things that I know are not public knowledge from the police investigation point of view. But like I said, there's so many of these things out there that, investigation discovery channel or whatever it's called. I mean, you can sit and watch and pick up all you need to know about forensic tips, forensic, investigation methods. And that's unfortunately there. Yeah.
Okay. And then, I mean, it's hard not to think about that, isn't it? But yeah. Okay. So, and then last question. I mean, we discussed tonight the case of a teenage serial killer, and interestingly, in the last couple of weeks, I mean, it's been a bit of a theme because then we had the Jan Kempdorp offender, the young girl. I mean, are these possibly some of the youngest serial killers in the world? Is the question.
It could be. I mean, I have to say that I never really spent a lot of time studying overseas cases beyond the very well-known ones, because we just had so many of our own, and we had so many here that we're working on. So I'm not the kind of person who goes and reads widely about overseas serial murder cases. It's just, so sorry, people. In the same way, I don't really watch a lot of true crime documentaries and read true crime books, to be honest with you. I got enough of I was working at in real time. So there could be younger ones, to be honest with you. But definitely this would be, I think, safe to say, a very young age for this to be happening.
Absolutely. Okay, so Gerard, well, I mean, I think we've covered everything when we've gone over our allotted time for the evening, and I think it's been a pretty action-packed episode. I mean, certainly the case we discussed from Vredendal is quite concerning, and it will be interesting to see if we can just get any follow-up information on that. So we'll certainly try to do that. Just your final thoughts tonight, Gerard, your final thoughts on the case we discussed and on the conversation tonight.
Sure. I don't want to say something for the sake of saying something. No, that's it. I've said my thoughts.
I think we've said it all. How are you? Are you now? We are going to be taking a break from the live. We've got 3 pre-recorded episodes coming up. Do you maybe want to tease, do a little tease for next week's episode, which is, of course, yourself in conversation with your great a colleague, somebody in like yourself, extremely renowned in the field here in Africa and around the world. Give us a little tease for next week's conversation.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting because, we've never been on the same platform where we're definitely not speaking to each other. I mean, it's essentially just her and me mainly chatting. And as you say, you kind of just took a back seat and enjoyed it. So I think it's a unique opportunity to have just two profiles chatting. It's not you asking her the question and then me the question and then us answering you. It's a very kind of intimate, interesting and it's more like the backstory and the insights, what it was like and what was it for her, and I give my reflections on the same issue for me. So a nice sort of personal chat, I think. I think the only other time we've ever been in the same environment is where there was Jenny Cruz Williams, who's a book reviewer, radio personality here in South Africa. Many years ago, I think like 2011, I think it was, had like a little, in a coffee shop, some like book event, and you know, I were there, and I think we might have said one or two things each on the stage, but it was not a conversation between the two of us. So I think this is very intimate and you know, just a unique opportunity to see two people. You know, she's not going to like me saying it's the grandmother of profile.
Well, you said it.
And me, you know, after she left, after the year gap in between. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and hopefully it'll be the first of a number of conversations, because I know that, you know, she's also on YouTube, her channel Profiler on Record, which you guys should head over and check out and subscribe to. And and you know, we really encourage our community to be fans of local true crime. So that's next week. That's the 17th. And then for Christmas, we're on all the nights. We're on Christmas Eve. We're on New Year's Eve. Christmas Eve, we're going to be discussing the tragic case of Anisha van Niekerk with retired detective Lieutenant Colonel Jan de Lange, who we've had on the audio version of the podcast previously. So it's going to be great to have him in all his glory in conversation with us, and obviously your great pal from your days at the police.
I mean, he was in the case we discussed this evening. I mean, he was my buddy, my partner on this particular one when we went in to look at this case, and many others during my time in SAPS. Great guy, really great guy.
So that'll keep you company on Christmas Eve, and then on New Year's Eve we take a fascinating look at a case from the 1950s, the serial killer Elefasi Msomi. That's on New Year's Eve. I got the name right today.
You did.
Elefasi, not Elias, not Alpheus, Elefasi. Well done, Paul. So that'll be New Year's Eve then. So we've got some great episodes coming up over the next 3 weeks. We obviously will be on the chat as well while the episodes are playing out to respond to any comments or questions you might have on the chat. Please do send in your questions, guys, and all the other stuff. Like, subscribe, Patreon, you know, like I say, the more we grow this community and the more we kind of support each other, the more we can create great content. So thanks, Gerard, for another great conversation. I'm really starting to love spending my Tuesday nights with you. I'm looking forward to Tuesdays every week now. Hey, no, I know, it's wonderful, and the thing I'm most happy about is that Derek actually appeared on screen, because that's what I've been stressing out about. Because, you know, like I say, I'm pushing all the buttons here, so I want having a guest kind of come in late in the show. This was the first effort at doing that, so I'm glad that went really smoothly too. So I'm really chuffed tonight. Great episode. Thanks, Gerard. Thanks everyone for listening and for watching. Please share, and we'll be back again. Thank you to Amy, Bax, Fred, and like I say, of course, Gerard, as always. I'm Paul Llewellyn. Good night, Gerard. Keep looking over your shoulders, folks.